So Pete Hegseth supposedly texted secret war plans to a reporter. Tactics, timing, troop numbers, weapons details, targeting methodologies. Because this is what we're to learn from this Atlantic piece. This is the headline. It says it right here. The Trump administration accidentally texted me its war plans. U.S. national security leaders included me a group chat about the upcoming military strikes in Yemen. I didn't think it could be real. Then the bombs started falling by Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, so much of this, we can do some fun whataboutisms because whataboutisms are a good idea. There's a reason that the left tried to ban whataboutisms because they know they're playing that game of accusing the other side of that which themselves are doing. So let's do just a few whataboutisms here because the shock going through the intelligence services and the military complex, the shock. Was there shock when figurehead Biden was caused to make sure that our troops exiting Afghanistan only had one airport to choose from rather than two? Was there shock when they announced in advance they'd be leaving from a commercial airport, not the better fortified military airport? Was there shock when lawyers in Washington, D.C. said, yeah, we know that you've identified the terrorists driving with S-vests and IEDs towards the airport, but no, you can't take them out. Was there shock? Was there shock when we left behind hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment and secrets such as the faces and names and IDs and home addresses of Afghan citizens who helped us? Was there shock? Yeah, it was a mistake, or was it? To put these people on this text list or this signal discussion, or was it? Because a lot of people who are defenders of President Trump have a whole other view of this. It's not a view I'm willing to take in this because it put our troops at risk. But did they really share the war plans? Is that really what happened? I mean, I have reason to ask these questions because I have friends of mine who have served. I have a few friends who are still serving, not in this capacity, not in that theater, praise God, but they are. And of course, I've got my dear friend, Tim Cruikshank, CEO of Bone Frog Coffee. Tim was a Navy SEAL. He did 3 deployments on our behalf as a Navy SEAL, a medic attached to the SEAL teams. And post-SEAL life, he was a BUDS instructor and now the CEO of Bone Frog Coffee. Tim is a patriot through and through. God Country Team appears on every bag. And Tim texted me the day after the election and said, finally, we're getting our country back. So he created a bag. It's a special roast and a special bag. It is called Golden Age, and it refers to a resurgence as America as a dominant energy exporter. It refers to America now using wisely our power with which God has gifted us, and to whom much is given, much is expected. It's a celebration of a decision to stop wars rather than to pick them. It's a celebration of stopping the madness, of putting our money in DEI barrels and burning it. It's a way to recognize a change in America while you enjoy great coffee made with the help of a coffee expert. In fact, legend Dave Stewart, who started Seattle's best coffee. Go to bonefrogcoffee.com/Todd. You get 10% off your first purchase, 15% off subscription coffee. Skip the whole thing about figuring out if you love the company. Come on, you already do. bonefrogcoffee.com/Todd. CNN says, Jaws, we're on the floor.
Jaws are on the floor across Washington, across the national security space right now, because here you have a reporter who was included in the deliberations over one of the biggest national security events this year, the bombing of the Houthis that started on March 15th. And Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was privy to the details days ahead of time. What happened is that it appears that Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, added him to a group conversation on Signal, this encrypted app. So presumably these other officials felt like what they were saying was safe. Why he was added, we still don't know. That is the first of a long list of questions. But others on this group chain included the CIA director, the secretaries of defense, of state, the director of national intelligence, and the list goes on. An update was sent by Pete Hegseth, the secretary of defense, to the others, in which it had stunning detail about, Jeffrey Goldberg reports, the forthcoming strikes, the information about targets, the weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and the attack sequencing. And Goldberg repeatedly says he didn't know if it was real. It could have been a disinformation campaign. It could have been foreign spies who were trying to do this. But sure enough, 2 hours later, the bombs started to fall, and the officials on this group chain started to celebrate what had happened. Marco.
So war plans, really, or an attack plan? Words matter. And in Trumpville, that's different from people who like what the president is doing, who like his policies, who like Pete Hegseth, who think Hegseth is going to be a great Department of Defense head, who like what the president's done in terms of approaching the globalists and fighting back against globalism, love that, who question some of his choices. Those of us who are Trump realists have to look at this with honest eyes. These weren't war plans. It was a discussion about an attack. They shouldn't have been shared with a reporter because it puts the lives of our servicemen at risk. But I'll share with you what some people in Trump land are saying. Pete Hegseth in this exchange said to VP, I fully share your loathing of Europe's freeloading. It's pathetic. That Mike is correct. We're the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else is even close. Question is timing. I feel like now is as good a time as any. Given POTUS' directive to reopen shipping lanes, I think we should go, but POTUS still retains 24 hours of decision space. As I heard it, the president was clear, green light, but we'll soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. We also now need to figure out how to enforce such a requirement. Example, if Europe doesn't remunerate, then what? If the U.S. successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain extracted in return. J.D. Vance to Pete Hegseth, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing out Europe again. Let's make sure our messaging is tight here. And if there are things we can do up front to minimize risk to Saudi oil facilities, we should do it. Hegseth, VP, I fully share your loathing of, once again, bailing out Europe. So on the good news front, they're saying behind the scenes what they say to us in person. They hate bailing out Europe. We're to expect something in return when we handle this for you. Again, this was not the case with the figureheads or, for instance, this. Was there shock and amazement when Hillary Rodham Clinton decided to start a war in Libya? Clearly to build up her national security cred? Was there shock and awe when Ben Affleck had access to her text messages, but not Ambassador Christopher Stevens, who, of course, was unalived and all that? Was there shock and awe? What they said in public, oh, this was a YouTube video. This was a protest that got out of hand because of a YouTube video was absolutely the opposite of what they were saying in secret. Here, what Hegseth and Vance are saying behind the scenes is consistent with what they say from the stage. So here's where some people who are full on behind President Trump in all things, they're the people to whom the president is never wrong. Now, President Trump had nothing to do with this. He's not the person who made the mistake, if it in fact was a mistake. I think it's a mistake to ever put our troops' lives at risk unnecessarily. Cynical Publius has a big following on Twitter. Interesting guy, interesting read. I think it's a guy. Read the Signal chat in the Atlantic article. The minute I read that chat, my very first thought was that Goldberg was specifically and deliberately included so that he would leak what he saw to the public. The idea was to let Europe know how unhappy American leadership is with Europe's unwillingness to pull its weight militarily. The back channel, seemingly accidental nature of that reveal was powerful, and I believe it was intentional. Also, as someone who's read his fair share of top secret SCI war plans, this ain't it. Now, I have no idea if this person's ever read anything top secret or Psy war plans because there's no bio to indicate that to me. And when people are anonymous, as is their choice, their privilege, they get to do that. It's their right, not privilege. I don't believe anything they say about their background. Just my choice. Sounds like he knows what he's talking about, except for this. They didn't have to leak this ahead of time. They could have done something behind the scenes. They could have had a person familiar with the discussion leak them the signal. They could have leaked it to conservative media. That, wow, they really are serious about not bailing out Europe. They could have leaked it to European media. Look at this, Hegseth and Vance trashing our allies behind the scenes. They could have leaked it to The Guardian. that the U.S. might leave Europe hanging. They could have leaked it to anti-oil people. They're protecting Saudi oil facilities. They could have leaked it to peaceniks after the fact. But prior to the attack, putting our troops at any risk, even if it's not war plans, it's a discussion of an attack, it is not something that I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt on. We have to be able to call things out. Not everything is multi-layer chess. Let's be honest with ourselves.